Okay, then, fine, go ahead.
Well, welcome on behalf of Louder Than Words, and it's an absolute pleasure for me to introduce to you the one and only Mr. Steve Howe.
Hello there. Hi, Daryl. How you doing? How are
I'm,
everybody out
I'm,
there?
I'm not bad. It's lovely to speak to you, and you're doing all right at the moment.
Yeah, covering, the possibilities and the realities that we face each day. And it's tough, it's tough for
Sure.
everybody. Very, very tough.
All your dates, though, are back to next year that you would have had this year.
Well, we put them on to next year, but, it's not looking so good. We haven't made an official announcement, but I think a lot of things are moving on to 2022, but it's beyond our control. That's all we can say.
Of course.
We'd love to be out. It's easier.
And knowing your work rate, have you recorded sort of 400 albums since you've been in lockdown?
Can't say too much about that, but yeah, I've been keeping busy, and fortunately I did a little upgrade on my studio last year, so it's become a kind of haven of possibilities,
Sure.
and so yeah, mum's the word there.
Of course. Well, you're only sharing it with us and the whole of the internet. So this
Yeah, of
is
course.
the fabulous book. Nice jacket. This is like a sort of baseball jacket, American baseball jacket.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think if I can remember who designed that. Yeah, I picked it up somewhere. I really liked it. Yeah, it was nice.
It's a
It's
great.
not actually like that at all. It's quite European in a way because it's got these kind of soft sleeves and things. Yeah,
Sure.
it's unusual.
Sure, no, it's really the part, and so the book came out. I was amazed. It was much earlier this year because I had the pleasure of reviewing it for Record Collector, and it was like April time around there.
Well,
So
it was due to come out in April, and they were so geared up that they just said, "Look, we don't have a reason other than, of course, there is a terrible reason, but we're all geared up, so let's move." So I said, "Yeah," and I'm pleased we did it. Gave people something to read in the lockdown.
I mean, you must have been asked to do a book many times in your past.
It might have been floated. I met a journalist once. I remember he said, "Oh, if you want to do a book, collaborate with you." And I guess, nothing ever really came very solidly about it, other than I enjoyed doing my Steve Howe guitar collection book. That was a real, sort of pipe dream to do that. So that was marvelous. And I worked with Mickey Slingsby, the photographer, and Tony Bacon. So
Sure.
that was, I got a few of the ropes going there, but that was nothing like what I did when I wrote this.
And so how did it come about? What made you finally decide to take the plunge?
Well, a funny thing, it was almost a spontaneous moment. It was 2009, and I've been lucky enough to been loaned a chalet in Switzerland on a mountain.
Nice.
And I was sitting there, and I suddenly realized I had about 3 weeks where I really didn't have any plans. So I just turned my attention to it, and I wrote what was the kind of like infrastructure of the first chapter, where it's about my younger days.
Sure.
So I did the predictable thing. I started, like talking about when I was a kid and things. So I did about 15,000 words, and I thought, well, that's a start. So then I gauged for quite a few years that I was going to be looking for a deal, and that would kind of stimulate my desire to finish it, to know it was going to come out. Of course, the world started changing, internet, and I got very busy in the second decade of the 2000s with so many projects, and the book kind of was shunted back in priority. But I think it was around then I did another stab. I think I added some more, but it was really meeting up with Omnibus through Zoe Howe,
Sure.
my son Dylan's wife, and so we got an introduction. It was kind of nice. It felt like the right place, music book people. I'm in the music business, so it really made logical sense, and I much enjoyed that. I like some contact. Don't mention that word at the moment, but it's nice to meet people, and we all know how normal that felt, and it was totally normal, and it felt close and nice. So we got on, and they encouraged me, and I started to put time aside in quite big chunks, like months here and there. I could spot a month, and I say, well, I'll really try and get down to it. And I'm quite disciplined in that way. If I've got something to do, I get on with it. One of the interesting things was, although I kept, like making up little tunes and dittying around on the guitar. I didn't really construct a great deal of my kind of demo structures where I put pieces together and record them. And they lay kind of waiting, because I found that left, right side of my brain, it was occupied, you know, the part of me that built it, because I was building a book instead.
Right. Sure.
So when the book finished and I was really done with it, middle of last year completely, then I had this outpouring of musical ideas. But I little did I know that I could have even more time on it than that, because yes, we're planned last year, and this is what we did. We worked in the first half of the year kind of hard, and then we took the second half off. So that allowed me, fortunately, I'd virtually finished the book, and it was just, you know, the quite elongated stage of the design and the corrections and, you know, lawyers' recommendations and little things like, you know, tidying it all up and getting, I mean, that's really one of the harder parts of the book, to be quite honest.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, it was fun to write. I mean, maybe your next question is, you know, well, you asked me how it kind of came about. That's how it came about.
Sure.
But when it came down to more like 2015, 2016, then, you know, that was really then compelling to really, you know, do more work and do a bit more research and kind of get the style of the book going. And then, you know, some collaboration, you know, as I was going along, I was collaborating with Chris, one of the editors, and basically we kind of, you know, Chris Charlesworth, we kind of like made some progress, and then we did some more refinements later. And it was quite a collaborative project, even though, I mean, I did write it all on my laptop, you know, there was, it was real.
There was no ghost.
I wrote it on Pages, you know, which is an Apple kind of.
Oh, yeah.
So I kind of like that format. And so why did I write it? I suppose might be the next question.
I could ask you that.
I don't want to answer my own questions, but it kind of leads on from one thing to another.
I wasn't going to ask that, but please tell me, why did you?
I wasn't sure until that time up in the chalet that I'd ever had a burning desire to write a book. And then I guess I had a little bit of reflective time, and I look back and I still remember some stuff. You know, I mean, you don't always remember the stuff you want to, but you know, I could remember it. And I thought, well, it's not really going to be a fake book. Like I tend to be skeptical of books that quote actual sentences from like 40 years ago. You know, and then he said this exactly.
Yeah.
So I tended to use that technique of not really, you know, being exactly Pacific, but telling a story about. Well, I've had a very busy work life in music and a very beautiful time in family creation and seeing how grandchildren come along and everything. So, I mean, I've had a lot going on, and it's been mostly beautiful. You know, we've had our disasters and our awful moments, but basically we've, you know, I've combined, you know, this in the book to some extent, and it's not a book about my family. I couldn't write a book about them. It's too much too personal, you know. It's much too wonderful. You know, I couldn't find the right words. But my career and the way I interact with other people and my guitar work and guitar collecting, you know, already there's a few topics, and that's really what the book is. I warn you, it kind of rambles through, as you know. It rambles through different sides of my interest in music, and I'm still amazed at, you know, 70, well, I'm almost going to say 74 because it's only 3 or 4 months away, and 74. But I still love the sound of the guitar. And if that wasn't true, then my career would have been very different, say, you know, 10 or 20 years ago. It most probably would have gone. But I think a career is also something that broadens anyway, or if you let it, or you allow it, or you encourage it, you know. And, you know, I'm much more interested in production than I used to be. I'm much more flexible as a writer and even as a singer, you know. So basically, you know, I feel in good shape to carry on, you know, being a musician. So the book really is packed full of crazy moments where, you know, my life was rushing by at an astounding place. And then I even took on more, you know, and I did solo stuff and I did the trio and, you know, I did all these other things because my music kind of, you know, directs me quite often, and being a solo guitarist at times, you know, on my own with a guitar is most probably the pinnacle for me in my musicality, even though, because a lot of that writing that I play, my own compositions, actually are really long-term projects to write in themselves, you know, things Sketches in the Sun, or, you know, Ram or Clap, Mood for a Day, all these things. They're all very me, and fortunately, by the time I can record them, I know them so well. So that's in the book as well. It's about indicating that although what you see is what you kind of get in some respects, also I think for me, part of the enjoyment of being a musician is being not pinned down and not being one particular thing. You know, even I almost define being called a rock guitarist now, because, you know, I like a broader definition, if you like, of the kind of things I do.
Sure. And I mean, I think that's one thing, that you have so many styles. I mean, I think you say in the book, you compare your work to that of a painter. You know, it's a very sort of painterly way of doing things, but sometimes you want to, you know, splash the color, sometimes you hold the color back.
Oh yeah, I think the you know, there's everything that connects arts together, and they you know, they have very similar kind of growth, and they have a very similar kind of, you know, you can have success with something, maybe this one's not so good, you know, or you can nurture something for a long time and create something really beautiful. And I think that applies on lots of different levels. And one of the things I've done, I guess, with the guitar is use a sort of texturing approach where I'm not always the same guy, you know, and help to get my music to have its identity through that way. So I guess parts of my book are also about the people I've met, you know, like I met Chet Atkins, who's my biggest idol, who's my biggest influence, I think. But, you know, also a lot of the great players and modern players of today, you know, like Steve Morse and Albert Lee, and the guys in my, almost not, well, I'm a bit of a granddad of a guitarist, really, in some respects. But some of these guys really excite me, and, you know, I talk about it a bit as I go through the book. Besides, Yes, I mean, we haven't mentioned Yes, fortunately, yet.
Not yet.
We're about to.
We will do at some point, but I have to say, this picture here of you and Les Paul is just brilliant, because, you know, at that time you were one of the biggest names in the world as a rock guitarist, and you're just like a fan. You were just like, that beam of your face is just brilliant.
You can see it, absolutely see it.
Was that the first time you'd met Les Paul?
That was the first time. I met him on, I think, two other occasions.
Yeah.
And I think I talk about him in the book. And he was always very gamey. He was up for kind of a fun. He was a kind of a trickster guy, you know.
Right.
He never just let me kind of, oh, hi, Steve, do you want to play? You know, it was never that simple. There had to be a twist. And I think that shows his tremendous personality and, of course, his inventiveness, you know. So he always steered things, you know, in his own sort of Les Paul way, you know. There was a way. Certainly that was what he liked when he said to me, oh, I mainly get on with guitarists who I hang out at the bar with. So I thought, oh, that rose me out then.
I love that. Your opening line, you have that marvelous preamble of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and then that chapter 2, you know, I held a dream when I was about 10 years old. I would play guitar and live life as an artist.
It's true. I can't believe I had that, and it stayed with me all this time, and it most probably fueled. I was thinking about it earlier. There was a really silly time. I think I mentioned it briefly in the book, where I was trying to analyze how I could have thought when I got a guitar that I could play it. You know, I mean, people say, you can't play, you haven't. No, I can play. And it was like really dumb. I mean, it was like Dumber and Dumber, you know, built in one. But it's like, no, you just got this guitar and you're fumbling on it and it sounds terrible, but you think you can play. So that blind belief, I think that's quite an interesting title I might use for a piece of music, because blind belief is something that's not really, you know, is rarely talked about in the sense that there can be something that you can possess. You can't really describe at all, you know. It's a certain belief. And yeah, I did have that belief. I mean, I don't know what you know, you think about, you know, the influence of like Hollywood and Hollywood movies and everything, and what artists were. But I wasn't really interested in what I looked like and what I did. But I was definitely interested in, you know, playing the guitar and actually making that what my life would be about, and it did come true. So it was a, you know, I sometimes thought, was that an inept statement, or was that a commitment also, you know, for me at the age of 12?
Sure, sure. And I mean, you've. I think one of the things that it's almost said in that line itself, that the book is very warm, and the evocation of certain times. I mean, the way your descriptions of London and you being sort of straight in the heart of the scene with the syndicates and then the in crowd and then Tomorrow. I mean, you were a sort of proper hipster, weren't you?
I was a hippie, yeah. I'm not at all ashamed to admit that. I
But
think
before that, you were quite sort of hip. You were a bit moddy almost.
well, yeah, I think I went through the stages of when I met Keith West and I was in the in crowd. You know, suddenly they were quite successful, and I kind of upped my game, upped my thinking a bit, and thought, well, okay, well, this is happening. You know, I mean, the syndicates were kind of struggling, and we were a bit kind of naff really compared to what the in crowd were like the next step up. So we started to have fun, and it was a real thing. But yeah, the style of that was soul. We were playing kind of soul, and we were kind of bit mods, but then as soon as, you know, the Flower Power thing happened, you know, we just jumped in the deep end really, and you know, that was that I guess that allowed me to find that I could improvise a long time. You know, you gave me 10 minutes, I'd do something in it, you know, I'd get on with it. And this was the right time to find that, because this was very emotive of the sort of craziness of the psychedelic music. That there would be long improvisations, and I was ready to do it. I wasn't really particularly aware that I was doing it. It wasn't overly conscious, but I fell into it, and I particularly like the drone D. You know, you used to wind the pole pickup on the pickup pole on the D string, so we used to feed back on the 175 guitar, so it would feed back, but that was like pretty Indian. It was pretty much like a sitar. So yeah, I got into all sorts of crazy things, but certainly had a good time as well. So it was a big learning curve. And then to end the next year by going on tour with Eric Clapton, Delaney and Bonnie really showed me that the big time was hopefully only around the corner. There were some lulls before it between Tomorrow and Yes, but this wasn't a lull. It was a very exciting time for a month to tour with an act that, you know, sold out. You know, sold out everywhere.
Sure.
And you know, there was all sorts of rock stars around. You know, George Harrison, all this. It was a beautiful, beautiful thing. And so I guess you know, I was learning, you know, the business from a few perspectives, but mainly just experience on stage and being part of something bigger than, you know, a local band.
Sure, sure. And of course, your journey into Yes is sort of, you know, very well known. Chris knew you from Tomorrow, and I think John had seen you in Bodast, and Peter had left, and you were hunted.
Yeah, I was available. I was looking for something real hard, you know, because you know, things had, you know, were in a lully period. And it was only about 2 months again that kept happening, where I'd suddenly get this call, and I stepped into Yes. But when I got there and played with these guys, I mean, I was well impressed, you know, and you know, got the gig, and then felt that, well, I'll put everything I got into this. This is a good shot, you know, and everybody had so much, you know, personality and workmanlike. I mean, one thing, Yes, it still is. It encourages hard work. It isn't a band to be in if you're lazy, because we can't do that. You won't have the energy. So there's you know, it's a tough requirement, and certainly in the 70s we blazed through it like. You know, I was going to say like cavaliers or something. You know, we were kind of like taking it on board, but also building it and meeting all the challenges and, you know, the ups and downs that did happen. But mainly the great albums that, you know, are referred to and so much part of our live catalogue
Mm.
is based around records like Relayer and Fragile and, you know, Close to the Edge, only to name three. So we had a lot of very strong ideas, and Bill Bruford was part of that, and of course Peter Banks started out.
Mm.
Tony Kaye was in the original thing that I joined back in 1970, and gradually we just kept encouraging more players, you know,
Mm.
to come forward. And Patrick Moraz, you know, Wakeman, you know, Jeff Downs. It kind of like was a potpourri of musos.
I mean, it was always struck me as amazing how you work with all these different keyboard players, all, you know, all household names in their field. So from Tony to Rick to Patrick to Rick again to then to Jeff, and you, it's almost like there's a telepathy. I always sort of see, yes, as no one gets away with doing too much. As some, you know, everything's sort of balanced. That if the keyboards are running away, then the guitar comes in, and the you know, it's a beautiful balance. I mean, is that something you thought about in the writing and in the playing, or did it evolve naturally?
Well, I think it, you know, for me, was already going when I joined, you know,
Mm.
because Time and the Word and Yes, the first album, Yes, had great things about them. And basically, there was a kind of plot. Yeah, I think, well, I mean, I was going to say, well, I dare say we can't credit any one person with it, but I think that's not really true. I think that Chris and John, basically, when they started the band, they were the two, you know, who really kind of pushed the shape of it around. But to get Bill, you know, on drums and then get Tony on keyboards, however the assembly came together
Yeah,
before
yeah,
me, I
yeah.
can't quite think what it is. But you know, you know, it was a really good ship to join, you know,
Mm.
and it had great musical potential, and I think that was my main signal.
And I think, you know, you use that phrase cavaliers in the 70s. I mean, in a way, in the book, you almost sort of blithely move through all these situations, all these things that are presented in front of you. Well, look, I'm playing with Peter Frampton. We used to play in the small clubs. Now we're in, you know, some of the biggest stadiums in America. Yeah,
So
that's all right. What's next? You know,
yeah,
I mean, do
yeah,
you look
so
back on that and think, blimey, how did
yeah,
we get away
yeah.
with it?
I mean, it was like a never shifting, you know, environment around you. It kept changing, even though it was called Yes. And thinking every time I make an album, it was somehow imprint a new kind of thing about us. Certainly, Topographic did that, and then even going for the one was so joyful and Swiss and all this. You know, we were all kind of on some other kind of high. To say they weren't all as high, but basically there was this kind of forever. Building Yes up to something, and also meeting other people who, you know, we admired and you know, did things with or hung out with or bit, you know. So I mean, we weren't the biggest name droppers, but we were kind of we liked who liked us, you know. We warmed to our fans because we saw them as they had I used to say that they had a certain ear, you know,
Yeah.
to like Yes, and you know, and sometimes exclusively like Yes, you know. They had this kind of not twisted or distorted ear, of course, but a kind of, you know, tuneful ear, because in a way, one of the things about Yes, we did use a lot of major chords. In fact, we used a lot of chords, period. But you know, we also used a lot of majors when, you know, I joined the band when there was this kind of era, you know, blues guitar priority. You know, there's an awful lot of great blues players, you know, and they were all doing it. But blues had kind of become rock in a way, and rock become bluesy. And I guess we were not doing that. We
Mm.
never played the blues. Maybe Adventure was about as bluesy as we got. It was in the minor key,
Mm.
and you know, but it goes to majors. But basically, we really thought we were our own kind of, you know, musical entity, and we were, you know.
Mm.
So I guess that being around other people, you know, who were successful was important. You know, like you said, with touring with Peter that year, Peter Frampton. Was sensational, you know, and we didn't actually do a lot of. I mean, in the early days, we were opening for, you know,
Yeah,
bands, you know,
of
even,
course.
you know, Jake Isles or once or twice ELP. So we had to build. We built very quickly, and then before we knew it, we were playing all of our own shows. So it was only occasionally that we actually toured. I mean, we tend to have done that more in the last 10 years when we've toured with, you know, Toto, and we've toured with Peter Frampton again, actually. And
Mm.
we've had biannual years of doing the summer with a package, and we did it last year with John Lodge and Asia, with me with a spot, and also ELP music from Carl. So we know that it's good to be around, you know, the people in our profession. It's great.
And I mean, you say that about Yes having the inner ear. I mean, that whole thing with the Roger Dean covers, the mysticism, the very length of the tunes by the meter at times, that were there, that did set you apart, and that musicality. You know, you look at who was near you, maybe ELP, Genesis at times. You know, Floyd were never technicians; they were marvelous players in their field, but they weren't virtuosos. You were almost in a sort of field of one. Maybe Gentle Giant, maybe some of those more, you know, bands on the fringes.
Well, I mean, what was coming was, of course, musicians who were even more nerdy and interested in, you know, blaring across the guitar, you know. And in the 80s, of course, you know, you had Steve Vai and Joe Satriani and all these guys, and we were a bit like, you know, gobsmacked, because in a way, yeah, we did have complexity, and we did change time signatures quite often. And we muddled about with music like we had, you know, like there was no law against it, and there isn't really. But I guess we did our own thing, and that was really the driving force of it, that we could be identifiable and recognizable was a nice facet. But then my career moves on, you know, with Asia and GTR. So I kind of got so much out of the 70s, you know, lots of success and recognition as a guitarist. It was fantastic, and it kind of carried on over into the 80s, of course, because Asia was very successful with this first album. And then that's when I got another guitar award, and they said, well, you can't have any more, it's 5 years and then that's it. So I said, well, thank goodness for that. And then, of course, my friend Steve Morse became the top guitarist straight away after me, and I was very proud.
But it's interesting you say about Chris Charlesworth writing the book with you. I mean, Melody Maker, it's almost like Yes had a reservation on the front page for most all of the 70s. There was usually a picture of you pulling a face and doing a solo.
Well, it maybe isn't surprising you mentioned that, but it's very surprising that earlier I was flicking through and looking at different places, and that's one of the places I look, was when I say that, you know, Melody Maker use these live shots of me very, very often, and put Yes across the front, and it was me with that lovely 175. So basically, I was very lucky, you know, to get used like that. You know, I think it might have caused a little envy at times, because it wasn't really fair, you know, the one guy. But I was being picked out and singled, and maybe there was something about the excitement. You know, I think the whole band was great at that time. I mean, Yes Songs documents really a band that really did have electricity, you know, of a very, I mean, you couldn't repeat it. I mean, it's not, you know, it can't, you know, there's something, you know, when you get the originators, it's very, very good. Doesn't mean to say everything else pales to being unimportant, of course, not at all. But basically, as a record of a band that worked together very, very well, then something like Yes Songs demonstrate the kind of things that we did.
And you're very warm about going for the one in the book as well. That seemed to be that whole Swiss experience, and you in the hotel with the family, and it just seemed everything sort of came together at that point.
It kind of did. I mean, you know, also I kind of hint, don't I, in the book, really, that there are a lot of like nice facades to our world in Yes, and also there were some struggles and battles and winnings and losings as we went along, and I think that's only fair to include, because it's a kind of an honesty that I couldn't really hide. But I did notice that one thing I don't always do is I'm not always serious. And there's little, like in brackets, little things sometimes that I saw a couple of in my little journey through some moments. And I was quite pleased about that, because it's, you know, I do rest sometimes on the tongue-in-cheek side rather than the sort of, you know, I'm not sure that people want to read books, you know, about your, you know, your addiction, or your, you know, how long you spent in hospital, or how much money you wasted getting yourself out of your brain. You know, I mean, I think that's really, really boring, immensely boring. So yeah, I might touch on a few little fun outings I had during the early 70s, but you know, in the most part, I try and treat it as a positive experience. But you know, I don't think, you know, too much sadness makes for a good biography. Although, of course, that's really depending on how honest you want to be. I guess there was a cut-off point, you know, with things, you know, with everybody there must be. But I certainly don't want to harp on anything that causes that kind of consideration.
And
Because
I think one of the sorry, Steve.
Hmm.
I was going to say one of the lovely things is the balance you've got between that light and shade, where, you know, you certainly don't pull any punches on yes politics in there at times, but
really.
you're also, you know, appreciate when it works, and when, you know, what you have and what you had and what you continue to have. So
well, of course, all my yesterdays is taken from, you know, it's a bit of a pun on yes, of course, in a way, and that seems good. And of course, I'm in yes now. Continued it on after 2008 with Chris Squire and Alan White when Chris passed on. You know, we've augmented the band beautifully with John Davison and Billy Sherwood. Alan White still thumping away, and Jeff Downes on keys. And so Billy Sherwood's been absolutely great on filling a very big position. But when you look back across the whole run of the book, really, I see that middle period also when I wasn't in Yes, you know, the 80s was challenging because, you know, not only were drums kind of suddenly a machine, and there was a lot of talk about, oh, it's keyboards, you know, there's no room for guitars. And I was like, no, I'm not going anywhere. Well, Steve Hackett and I weren't going anywhere because we had GTR.
That's right.
But then, you know, ABWH was a very special band because, you know, although we didn't have the wonderful Chris Squire, we had Tony Levin, and we made our own group of people who wanted to work together in that certain kind of way, you know. But of course, everything's a kind of gamble, and you know, you step one way and you gain something, and sometimes you step another way and you lose a little. But I think then the early 90s taught me a lot about self-sufficiency and how I was really dedicated to making solo albums and doing solo tours. And I did a few of those across, you know, the whole period. But I guess bands, you know, there's a thing about me and bands. You know, I've been in bands and I'm still in a band. So even though, you know, it would seem like a simplistic heaven to just be a solo guitarist, you know, it would be actually, you know, but you know, that wouldn't totally do it. So I've got to kind of wrestle with finding a balance, and that's what I do, and that's what I enjoy, and that's why when I tour with any band, you know, I do some solo guitar playing, because I'm not going to let that be forgotten, or rather that I want to play that kind of music as well, you know, because it is part of the other music. It isn't separate. You know, it's not like it's alien or it's overly classical, or, you know. So I see a thread, you know, in the way I appreciate the guitar, I guess, and other guitarists, which is really, again, you know, something I'm, you know, full of praise for, because I think if you're not listening, then you're not getting the picture, and I listen.
Sure. And that's, you know, you talk about the 80s. I mean, Asia for me are a great blind spot. I adore Yes, you know, I've got lots of offshoot stuff. I've got the component parts of it, and I've still, apart from the hit single, I've never heard an Asia track, because I was on the other side. I went off to listen to Frankie and ABC and things like that, which of course you had a role in Frankie as well. I could always smell the prog there somewhere. But what, I mean, I'm fascinated. What would you recommend to listen to of Asia?
Of Asia?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, really, the first album is a chunk of work that encapsulates quite a lot of John Wetton's writing for some period before that. And of course, when at my suggestion we got Jeff Downes in, that they became a great team writing. So I find that whole first album very kind of thoughtfully structured
Right.
and dynamic. You know, things like Time Again and Without You. You know, shows a kind of another side of the arranging. John was always great when he played music that he didn't write as well, and he moves around on the bass a lot more when he's got some music of mine, and that's what happened in Here Comes That Feeling, you know. And so, I mean, you know, I don't know whether you wanted me to suggest one song,
Well, no,
but
no, no. But just
the first album, you
yeah.
know,
Okay.
is really encapsulated. I mean, if that band could have, you know, not been rushed into the next one, all these buts,
Yeah.
you know, and actually kind of got into a nice working route of doing albums like that, it would have been marvelous. So when we did the reunion, we tried to make sure we made some fairly, you know, some of the reunion stuff's actually quite nice that we did from 2006 onwards for the albums. But basically, that first album carries all the signposts, you know, you need for what Asia was thinking we wanted to be.
Sure.
And it wasn't like Yes, it wasn't like ELP, it wasn't, you know, it wasn't like UK or Suicide King Crimson. But we certainly did play those bits of music on one tour where we did our career music, you know. And Asia playing Roundabout was kind of kinky.
Wow.
But yeah, John sung it really great. John Beckman sung it really great. But it was great fun playing Fanfare and, you know, Caught the Crimson King. Even, you know, Video Killed the Radio Star.
Sure.
Because that was Jeff's, you know, big thing.
Story, yeah.
Mm.
And of course, one must always talk about Trevor Horn. Drama is a fantastic album, as is Fire From Here. But I love that fact you were sort of like, you know, you played on sessions for Propaganda and Frankie. And I mean, that seemed like a fun time as well, where all these things were sort of happening.
Yeah, it was. I'm sure I did other sessions that I don't know ever what happened to, but they were all fun. And I guess that was, you know, as I described in the book, you know, that was something I took on board. You know, I quite liked going in cold, thinking I was just popping in to say hi, and then suddenly, oh well, look, since you're here, you know, I'd hear these. Since you're here, have you got a guitar? And sometimes I did in the car, you know, or he had something, you know. But yeah, I mean, just the kind of community. There was a community when it went around that time a lot, and it was happening. I mean, I was going from some working on something maybe slight or just hanging out, you know, with Trevor or Steve Lipson and saying hi. And then I was going to the townhouse where Jeff, you know, was producing GTR. And, you know, that already that was quite a mixed bag. So the recording's flashing. Does it always flash, or does it flash when it's running out of time? Because
I don't know.
I think it flashes when it's recording, actually.
I think it flashes when it's recording.
Yeah,
I'm still going.
Otherwise, we have not been recording. No, but I'm sure you're right. Sorry to worry you.
Recording here. It says it proves we're live. It's like
recording. We're live. Yes, it's
definitely. If we're not, we'll have to do it again tomorrow. Or just have it as a lovely memory. So there it is.
Yes.
All my yesterdays. You are now at a point. I mean, obviously, this is probably the longest you haven't been on the road since 1964.
Yeah.
I mean, Love Is was a beautiful album. Again, that sort of got caught in the lockdown a little bit, but
yeah, we delayed it till July. Yes,
sure. And I mean, that's a tremendous work. Just, I mean, it's basically completely you with Dylan on drums and then a few guests here.
Just John Daviston on harmonies and bass on the songs. Yeah, so it's it was all prepared, like the book. It was all prepared last year.
Yeah.
I didn't do anything on it. It was just like we timed it to come out in April around the time of the book. So it just had to come delayed. Yeah, thank you.
Sure. No, it's lovely. Dylan's playing on it is really vibrant. I mean, the two of you playing together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we've done so much work together. It's beautiful.
Sure. No, that is lovely. So that's out, and you're also doing the homegrown series.
Yeah, the homebrew series continues. Yes, I've done 6 now of this like really eclectic kind of weird stuff, and yeah, I'm preparing homebrew 7 for early next year.
Homebrew, because I mean, there's some sort on that last one. There's no disguise. I mean, a group build a career out of that tune, and it just seems to be one you just, you know, did that before breakfast, and I've got another 5 to come later. I mean, you've always had this tremendously commercial ear amongst all the other
It's funny. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how to really describe that, but I mean, you know, it was unfashionable in the 70s to like ABBA, but I loved them, and I told people, you know. So there's always been great pop, you know. There's no doubt about it. Some of it is, I mean, Eddie Cochran, you know, Come On Everybody is really a piece of pop, but it's classic. So the classic all the way along, there is classic bits of pop. So I've been influenced by everything, everything I've heard in some way or another, and I do quite enjoy that side of things when it feels right.
So obviously we're slightly governed by the situation we're all in, but I mean, in the perfect world, what is next for you? Or so Relayer is that's the next when the Yes Machine comes out.
When Yes get touring again, we'd love it to be next April, but it may have to be later. And we will be featuring the album Relayer and building a set around that idea. One album, in one album from beginning to end. Sometimes we do two albums, but this time it's going to be one, and the other set is a crossbreed, if you like, of some of the things we feel we ought to play. We don't like to be 100% predictable in that ever, because that's boring. So we tend to
roundabouts at the end and
well,
Starship Troopers.
There are some unavoidables, which we love. I mean, Roundabout has got to be, you know, for Yes, something that we would always play. So yeah, we love it, and we'd like to do that. You know, we hope to have you know, other projects that are meaningful and you know, timely, you know, to work around. So yeah, it's a time of not hibernation in the sense of you know, actual, but a kind of a you know, the curtains are drawn, the doors are shut, people are getting on, but hopefully that will end, and we'll get back to something that we know and love, which would be more communication, more ability to tour and do things, and optimism and faith, you know, and hope.
Sure.
And a few other things.
Sure. No, absolutely. It's well, who knew when all of this was going to happen? A very bizarre time. But what I will say is it's on Omnibus. We're putting this out before Christmas. Do an ideal stocking filler to go with your Love Is album, and also that the last the Yes from Vegas album, I would say is in the top quarter of Yes live albums. Really great. Lovely choice of material on there.
Yeah. No opportunity necessary.
So no, absolutely. In fact, I've got it here. Look,
that's a real funny one to play, I can tell you.
What I loved about that actually was just the selection of sort of, I mean, obviously Roundabout Starship Trooper, but I loved the face you were going sort of, you know, America was played again, which is so like an Onward, and
yes,
I think Onward's such a beautiful song. So there you are. Look at that. It's like I'm a walking Steve Howe. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us.
All right. It's been a pleasure, Daryl. Thanks so much for having me, and thanks everybody for watching. And take care, and hopefully we'll get down the end of the tunnel where the light is.
Let's hope so. Thank you so much, Steve.
All right then. Toodle pip.